They didn't survive World War II because they were lucky. They survived because they carried things that worked when everything else failed. That's the part of history that rarely gets airtime. Not the tanks or the speeches, but the small, brutal, practical tools that kept soldiers alive when supply lines broke, radios died, and help wasn't coming. Items so effective, so independent, that the modern world quietly pushed them aside once technology took over. Today, we're pulling 5 of them back into the light. No myths, no exaggeration, just real survival gear used by real people in the worst conditions imaginable, and why those ideas still matter more than we like to admit. The mess kit that did more than feed soldiers. At first glance, a World War II mess kit looks boring. A few pieces of metal folded together. Nothing impressive, but that simplicity was exactly the point. These kits were usually made of aluminum or steel, designed to nest into a single compact unit. Soldiers used them to cook, boil water, eat, melt snow, and even dig shallow fire pits when needed. There was no single-use mindset. Every piece had multiple jobs, and none relied on fuel cartridges or fragile components. Here's the important part most people miss. Boiling water was survival. Dysentery, parasites, and waterborne diseases killed soldiers just as effectively as bullets. The mess kit was a frontline health tool, not just a plate. These days, modern outdoor gear, well, it often splits up cooking, water purification, and eating into separate products. But back in World War II, soldiers carried just one thing that handled all of it. No batteries, no filters to worry about replacing. Just fire and metal, plain and simple. That kind of design, honestly, doesn't sell too well today, but it'll work anywhere humans can make heat. The trench lighter that never failed. You know, World War II soldiers didn't depend on those disposable lighters. Instead, they carried trench lighters, usually made of brass, fueled with liquid fuel, and sealed up tight enough to survive rain, mud, and even freezing cold. These lighters, well, they weren't really about convenience. Fire meant warmth, cooked food, sterilized tools, morale, and sometimes even life-saving signals. Matches could fail, and cheap lighters could crack. But a trench lighter? That could be fixed right there in the field, just with some scraps and a bit of patience. Here's where it gets interesting. Many trench lighters were designed to burn low and steady so they'd conserve fuel. Some even had wind guards built right into the design, long before modern wind-proof lighters were ever a thing. Today, fire starting has been reduced to disposable plastic. When it fails, people just shrug and grab another. Soldiers didn't have that luxury. Their tools had to survive months of abuse. That mindset is uncomfortable for a throwaway culture, which is exactly why it faded. Every soldier carried part of a shelter, often called a shelter half. On its own, it looked, well, pretty useless. But when combined with another soldier's piece, it formed a tent. That's already clever, but it didn't stop there. These shelter halves were waterproof canvas. They doubled as ground covers, rain cloaks, windbreaks, stretcher material, camouflage screens, and emergency bandages. Soldiers wrapped themselves in them during cold nights, used them to collect rainwater, and even to hide equipment from aerial view. Modern camping gear, separates rain jackets, tents, tarps and bivy sacks. But back in World War II, soldiers carried just one piece of fabric that adapted to the situation. The deeper lesson here isn't nostalgia, it's adaptability. When gear can shift roles instantly, you just don't need as much of it. That idea doesn't really align well with modern gear marketing, but it aligns perfectly with survival. The P-38 can opener that taught self-reliance. Small, flat, and, well, barely noticeable. The P-38 can opener weighed almost nothing, but it was actually one of the most important survival tools a soldier carried. Rations came in cans. Without a way to open them, food was useless. The P-38 clipped to dog tags or slipped into a pocket and honestly never left a soldier's side. But it did more than open cans. Soldiers used it as a screwdriver, a scraper, a cutting tool, and even a makeshift medical instrument for cutting bandages. It forced a certain mindset. You didn't wait for specialized tools. You made one thing work in many ways. Here's the clever part. The P-38 had no moving parts that could fail under stress. It was nearly indestructible. Modern multi-tools are impressive, but they rely on precision parts. The P-38 relied on physics and muscle. The field dressing designed for reality, not comfort. World War II field dressings were brutal and effective. A simple, sterile bandage sealed in wax packaging, designed to stop bleeding fast. No comfort padding, no unnecessary extras. Soldiers were trained to apply them one-handed, in the dark, under fire, because that's when injuries happen. These dressings focused on one goal: stop bleeding, prevent infection. Modern first aid kits often prioritize comfort and organization. World War II kits, though, prioritize survival under chaos. There's a difference. The idea that every individual carried immediate trauma care wasn't optional. It was survival logic. Today, many people just assume help will arrive quickly. World War II soldiers, on the other hand, assumed it might not arrive at all. That assumption changes everything. Why these items quietly disappeared? None of these tools vanished because they stopped working. They vanished because, well, modern systems replaced personal responsibility with infrastructure. Electric stoves replaced open fires. Disposable products replaced repairable ones. Centralized supply chains replaced individual preparedness. The problem is simple. When systems fail, people forget how to function without them. World War II forced millions to live with uncertainty daily. Their gear reflected that reality. Simple, durable, multi-purpose, designed for the worst day, not the best one. That philosophy doesn't vanish easily, but it does get buried under convenience. So, what these tools still teach us today, well, it's not about romanticizing war, not at all. It's really about respecting hard-earned knowledge. Every item we covered today shares the same DNA. It works without permission from technology, you know? It functions under stress, and it adapts when plans fall apart. That's the core lesson legacy of survival exists to preserve. History doesn't just tell stories, it hands us tested solutions. When we ignore them, we don't become more advanced, we become more fragile. If this kind of forgotten knowledge matters to you, stay connected with Legacy of Survival. Subscribe so these lessons don't disappear again. Like the video to help keep real history visible. And share it with someone who values self-reliance over convenience. Because the past still knows things the present desperately needs to remember.